EDUC 640 Balanced Literacy Week Number 4 Introduction. This is your weekly introduction to week number 4. In our flashback, I plan on revisiting the 7 structures of best practice and provide you with some other ideas and my own classroom experiences for each. The balanced literacy component that is highlighted this week is on guided reading and writing. For this upcoming week, we will focus on best practice in reading by diving into Chapter 3 of our text, looking at the essential reading strategies to use when you're teaching reading, exploring workshop models through some attached videos and a folder of different setups, and by reading an article from the National Education Association entitled 10 Proven Principles for Teaching Reading. 7 Structures of Best Practice Teaching. Chapter 2 was chock full of ideas on how to implement the 7 structures of best practice teaching. The thing I love about our text, and many of you have mentioned this as well, is how applicable many of the ideas are. What we find explained in our text are things we can infuse in our teaching and tweak to our style. Gradually work these ideas in. Don't overwhelm yourself, which I've said before and is the main reason I asked you to focus on 3 of the structures instead of all 7. Over the next several slides, I will provide ideas and share some of my own personal experiences utilizing and implementing those structures. Gradual release of responsibility. The gradual release of responsibility has been one structure we've explored already. As we've found out, it is the basis of all best practice teaching, implementing balanced literacy, and using the workshop model, which is one of the 7 structures too. Therefore, I'll be brief with these first 2 structures. Really, with just about everything we teach, we should be following the gradual release of responsibility model. It is such an essential component to quality teaching. Some of the best ways are to work in mini lessons with teacher modeling of the skills, strategies, and lesson expectations through think-alouds, where you're basically explaining out loud to students the process and steps you're going through in reference to whatever the focus is on. This is where most of the teacher talk happens, that monological part of your classrooms. Then, after you model it, then the class or group practices the skills together in shared practice. Our math teacher does think-alouds and guided practice all the time when teaching a new concept. And a funny story is that some parents came to see her at conferences and said that their student always complains about math, saying, "Mrs. Jones doesn't know what she's doing. She always is talking out loud and asks us what we think she could do." And that was too funny. Mrs. Jones had to explain to the parents that it was a teaching method she was using, showing students how she worked through a problem and then asking them for different ways to approach it. I find that since that story, I make sure to explain explicitly to my students that I'll be sharing how I go through the process in my mind. And I'll say, well, in my head, I'm thinking blah, 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 just to make sure that they know that it's a think aloud and I'm walking them through the process. During guided practice, students try the concept, idea, strategy, or skill on their own in small groups with support from the teacher as he or she checks in on each group. Independent practice is just as it sounds, and students use the skills, concepts, ideas on their own. And then at the end, to close it up, is a sharing time, which in our text mentions that it isn't necessarily part of the gradual release of responsibility model, but it is a good one to add, with students reflecting upon what they've learned. The workshop model. This is something that we'll be focusing on here in week number 4. And keep in mind that the workshop model is one that doesn't only have to deal with literacy. Teachers can conduct workshops in other content areas as well. Think about science. In my experience, our science teacher pretty much conducts a science workshop just about every time she does an experiment. She shows students how she thinks of a hypothesis, the steps that she plans on going through to conduct the experiment, and then explains the final results, reflecting on how or why the hypothesis was correct or not. Don't limit yourself to using workshops solely in reading and writing instances. For our purposes in this course, the focus is on literacy and implementing all the balanced literacy components, which can be best implemented in a workshop model. On page 47 of our text, I had personally starred the time allocations feature of how to break up the workshop in a 1-hour time frame. And this week, you'll see that I've provided a few different ways to arrange your time to best implement a workshop model in reading and writing. The big ideas of the workshop is to work in all the layers of the gradual release of responsibility and the balanced literacy components, along with being able to provide choice for students within the workshop. I like how one of the explanations in our text talks about the teacher as the master and students as the apprentices. The master coaches the apprentice, showing them how to complete a craft, watches over them as they complete it, and eventually, when the master feels the apprentice has mastered the skill, allows the apprentice to take over or move on to create his or her own product. This is how the workshop model works, using the gradual release in a timely manner, having students do instead of sit and get. Less teacher talk and more student do. The element of choice is the key. In my experience, I have used the workshop model with my genre studies. I conduct a read aloud with a genre of choice. In the beginning of the year, it's an action, adventure, suspense genre study. The last few years, I've read aloud the book Holes, completing think alouds about foreshadowing, using inferring skills, discovering character, and context clues. I start by explaining what the purposes and basic elements of the genre are. Some of the bigger ones for this genre is appealing to the reader's conscience, and experience victory through character actions as well as induce excitement. I explain that action-adventure typically unfolds in chronological order. Holes doesn't do that, so it provides me with an opportunity to explain the purpose of white space, which they will encounter a lot in our whole class novel, which is our guided practice of the action-adventure genre study. Action-adventure also typically uses violence as a way for things to change. And then we also have good guys and bad guys and lots of suspense. Through my read aloud and mini lessons, students are able to get a feel for the genre. Then we start our class novel with little mini lessons on how to dive deeper into the text, writing long off post-it notes and 2-column charts, exploring mood and tone and the different types of conflicts. This all happens through the mini lessons and guided practice. Then independence practice happens on their own. And in the middle of this unit, I have students choose their own action-adventure novel to use for their genre study. And through the read alouds class novel, the students have practiced the skills and strategies I want them to use in their independent genre study. I've been able to work with students who need extra support as well. Through their genre studies, they can choose any book of their choosing as long as it meets the requirements of the elements of action-adventure and is at their level. As they read, they confer with me, work in small groups, or in partners, sharing the elements, sometimes words that required utilizing context clues, because in 6th grade, using context clues is a huge thing since they'll be coming across more sophisticated vocabulary in the novels and reading that they're going to encounter in middle school. And they also share the ideas in their own novel, kind of doing little book talks along the way. When I'm creating a workshop unit, I use Understanding by Design, which I will share with you later in the course. This is a way of thinking backwards and focusing on the essential objectives as the heart of the unit and then planning out your activities after that fact. Strategic thinkers. Strategic thinkers are what we ultimately want our students to become, working through their thinking to come to an understanding. This has come to light by the introduction of certain strategies of thinking. You'll find an excerpt from Strategies at Work by Stephanie Harvey and Ad Guva, which provides some short summaries of the reading strategies referred to in the text: making connections, text-to-text connections, text-to-world connections, text-to-self connections, and using those meaningful connections to better understand the things you come across in learning. Using questioning strategies to set purposes, identify confusing parts, and move students forward in their quest for information. Visualization strategies, making movies in your head to help you better understand and support learning that is happening. Another one of those strategies is using inferring skills, reading between the lines, using what the author doesn't explicitly state to understand the text on a deeper level. Sometimes it is a simple prediction, but it can go much deeper than that. Determining importance is another one of those strategies, being able to sift through the ideas of a text and pick out the main ideas and what knowledge is important to truly understanding the concept at hand. Synthesizing is being able to provide a summary sometimes, making generalizations about the topic, or creating new meaning about an idea through information gained from multiple sources. One idea that isn't mentioned in the file on reading strategy is the idea of metacognition, which is also referred to as monitoring comprehension. We all know we have those great word callers who aren't making meaning as they read. This is what we refer to as metacognition, that making meaning as we read. We need to make students aware of this process, which is where all the other reading strategies fall into place, as well as implementing activities for students to participate in before, during, and after their reading. Before you start a new concept, it is always important to have students activate their background knowledge and share it, as well as set a purpose for your reading. Setting a purpose will help to focus students. Activating background knowledge not only will help to address misconceptions, but also will ensure that your students are coming to the learning with similar information and no one has a bigger advantage than another learner. Some other before reading activities could be anticipation guides, songs or images to front load the concept and get their minds ready to think about it, or student brainstorming. During reading activities can involve a myriad of different activities. Some of my favorites are stopping and jotting, coding the text as they read, and I'll share my own anchor chart of codes in an upcoming week, writing in the margins, or using 2-column notes where students can respond to parts of the text. After reading activities, ask students to reflect or demonstrate their ultimate learning. These can be projects, final conclusions, drama, written pieces. You can still utilize those chapter questions, but make sure that they're meaningful to the learning at hand with activities throughout the exploration of information. Reading should no longer be read pages so-and-so and answer the questions at the end. It should be about providing purposeful activities that have students thinking throughout the reading and their learning. Collaboration is another one of the 7 structures. Collaborative activities have students learning from one another. It's okay for your classroom to be loud and busy. That's what we want, as long as learning is occurring. It's about students learning with and from one another. Sometimes students can better understand a concept or process from another student without all the teacher talk. In my experience, I have implemented a lot of think, pair, shares throughout my lessons so students can hear from each other and re-explain what it is we need to do, know, or their way of understanding the topic. I utilize clock, quadrant, or compass rose type of partners, where in the beginning of the year, students find partners and keep those partners throughout the year. This kind of doesn't produce a lot of chaos if you already have those partners situated ahead of time. I call my partners word work partners or parts of speech partners to match with whatever work we're doing. Time isn't wasted this way by having to find people to work with. It's already set. Or I might have students work in small groups. I may decide to create the groups myself depending on the purpose, or let the kids choose. I might have heterogeneous or homogeneous groups. Some collaborative work I do besides the think, pair, share is jigsaw activities, where students become the mini expert on a chapter or topic, and then, in turn, teach it to the whole class or another small group. I provide prompting questions within my jigsaws that students must answer, and also ask them to provide some other nice-to-know or interesting ideas beyond the prompts. I also conduct book clubs or literature circles, which are collaborative in nature. We have small group discussions a lot, which the stage is set for in the beginning of the year, where I outline my expectations. Sometimes my small group discussions surround a prompt, sometimes they don't, and students know that all voices need to be heard and everyone should be contributing to the discussion. Sometimes I do that by having them pass around an object, and every time you get the object, you do have to say something. Sometimes it's by giving them little tokens or coins, and if you have 3 of them, you have to use all 3, or at least one of them, which also then cuts back on people that tend to dominate the conversation. Many classrooms now utilize responsive classroom expectations, which create a safe, collaborative climate for these types of activities. Integration. When things flow together, it makes so much more sense to students, which is the idea with integration. In elementary classrooms, this flow can work much more smoothly. In middle school and high school classrooms, it needs to happen amongst many teachers and can be more difficult, but not impossible. I like it because it makes it easier on the kids. They don't have to switch their brains to a different subject all the time. They can make more connections in their learning, and it becomes more meaningful that way. It also is nice since it makes you focus more on the need to know and get rid of some of that extra fluff that you've been teaching. Our 6th grade unit does a nice job with this in the study of ancient Greece. In reading, I teach the gods and goddesses and the different myths. The social studies teacher focuses on the ancient Greek life and the history of the ancient Greeks, their contributions to our modern day society. The English teacher has them creating ancient Greek newspapers and what they might say about the Olympics or certain festivals or the gods and goddesses. The science teacher brings in some of the theories and the Greek scientists of that time. Math focuses on the Pythagorean theory and Greek architecture. Then, with the myths that we learn in reading, the students create their own version of a fractured Greek myth. So think about the different versions of Cinderella or the three little pigs. And they perform them to their individual classes, and then I choose winners from each class that go on to perform in a Greek drama festival, which is performed for the whole 6th grade. And this is always one thing that students remember most about 6th grade, mainly because it was something that happened in all of their classes at the same time. Plus, it was tons of fun too. Representing to learn. The concepts that really stick with students are ones that they have to do, like the Greek Drama Festival I mentioned before. When we think about the cone of learning, students remember 90% of what they say and do. It is important to make sure to activate learning through multiple intelligences, which will be the focus of a presentation in the upcoming weeks. Have students demonstrate their learning in several different ways to make it stick. Once again, choice boards are important to show understanding and give them different ways to represent their learning. It can also be students participating in different activities beyond paper and pencil, through drama, role-playing, drawing, some kind of constructing of a model. Formative reflective assessment. This is one area that, for me, drives my instruction. The formative or reflective assessments your students that they participate in. I use exit slips a ton in my classroom, asking students how their thinking has changed about a concept from the beginning to the end of the unit, or it might be a specific prompt about a chapter. I also have a poster in my classroom asking students, what stuck with you? And before they leave, they write their big takeaways on a Post-it note and stick it on the door on their way out. These really help me to find out what I may have to reteach or what went well. Sometimes it's anonymous, sometimes I ask for initials or names. It depends on what I ultimately want. Formative assessment could be a simple thumbs up or thumbs down for opinions or yes or no types of questions. I also like to implement the fist to 5, where students put their hands on their chest, more so that others can't see their answers, and hold up a fist if they don't understand something that I was explaining at all, and can hold up a finger up to 5, and 5 would mean that they completely understand what I've been talking about. I like to do this with directions or a mini lesson before I have them head out to practice. I also use my reading bins to collect samples for student portfolios, which is another type of reflective assessment. And there is a resource out there called the Literacy Teacher's Playbook by Jennifer Saravillo that has a ton of great record-keeping ideas for keeping track of student growth and assessments for this structure. Highlight of the week is balanced literacy component is guided reading and guided writing. In this highlight, we're focusing on guided reading and writing. This is the time that you provide for students to work in small groups on the skill or concept from the mini lesson or the modeling session. Here, students are working together and the teacher is able to circulate through the room, finding out what students are understanding about the concept or idea taught. Students are working in groups that have been prearranged by the teacher, working in leveled text or articles at or slightly above their level, with support from the teacher and peers as needed. The role of the teacher is one of a coach or facilitator, clearing up misconceptions or redirecting students in the reading or writing process. Students are using a variety of ways to represent their learning in this component as well. This is where it is paramount to move students towards being strategic thinkers, by providing before, during, and after activities to guide their learning. Your your forum for this week is to utilize a strategy called Save the Last Word for Me. This is a strategy that I use in my classroom, and it works quite well with 6th graders, and I found that it works quite well for the forums in my graduate classes. So basically what you'll be doing is, as you read through chapter 3, think about 3 to 5 quotes or phrases from the text that really struck you. They could be quotes or phrases that was something you found interesting, made you have a profound thought, had a really strong connection with, or anything that really kind of struck a chord with you. What you'll do for this forum is you'll choose one of those quotes or phrases, and you will copy the quote directly from your text and note the page where you found it on in your initial post, which is due on Thursday. In that initial post, do not write down any of your thoughts. Just write down the quote or the phrase that you chose. Then, over the course of the next few days, your other classmates, and yourself included, will be commenting on the quotes that have been posted in the forum. Make sure when you're commenting on those quotes that you're sharing your ideas, your thoughts, and your interpretation of what that quote meant in the context of our story, or not of our story, but of our text and of your particular situation. Then on Sunday, you get the last word. So you'll need to revisit your initial post on Sunday, read some of the comments that were made about it, and have the last word. In your final post, you will need to share what your thinking was surrounding your choice of that quote, as well as synthesizing some of the replies that were made and other classmates' comments to your initial post. This time, when you are replying to other people, I'm asking that you do this over the course of 2 different days, since your initial post is just going to be a quote or phrase. So please make sure to space out your replies to others and make sure that by 11:55 on Sunday that you have returned to your initial post and given your last word. There are bulleted points, as you can see in the forum, for more details. And if you need more explanations, please make sure to contact me, and I will provide and answer whatever it is that you need. For this week's reflection, I ask that you look at the different workshop models, you think about what we've read in our best practice text, and you also read the article 10 Proven Principles for the Teaching of Reading, written by the National Education Association. In your reflection, I'd like you to think about what commonalities you have found throughout the course so far in regards to this article, and what are some of the big takeaways that you have found as well, things that you know you need to keep going in your classroom, and things that you could add as well to make sure that your teaching of reading is reflecting all the things that we've learned in this course. This assignment is due on Sunday at 11:55. This brings us to the end of our presentation. Remember to engage those strategic readers and be a strategic reader yourself. Happy reading!